Hello, hello, and welcome back to Relish the Journey. As always, I am Miles Biggs, hosting here with you all. And my guest today is Will Preble. And I got to tell you, this guy is 24. He's the CEO of a company that he founded. And if I didn't tell you he was 24, you might guess that he was 44. I mean, for God's sakes, two of his words were phenomena and equanimity. I mean, when I was 24, those were not my vocabulary. And I'm 30, and I still don't know if they are. So Will is a very interesting guy, very intellectual, very driven. A lot of stories shared here about how he's overcome some struggles to get to where he is today. And I'm confident he's going to do whatever the heck he wants to do after hearing him share his story here. So hope you all enjoy this one. And now let's meet Will. Will, appreciate your time and coming on the show. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, likewise, man.
So you're one of the people that I feel like I've been circling digitally for a while. Like an acquaintance of an acquaintance, a third degree LinkedIn connection, one of those deals where I've seen people that I know interacting with you, and that's brought me into your world. I think we know Tyler Webb is probably our common connection.
Yeah, Tyler's awesome. Yeah,
Yeah.
produced the first podcast that I started up about a year ago. Yeah,
Yeah,
good
and
guy.
he's helping me with an online course right now, actually. He's doing some video editing for me. So he's like an all over the behind the scenes guy. He's everywhere. He's doing some cool
He
stuff.
is the handyman of the digital world.
Yeah, I like that. I'm sure he will too. So I feel like you're similar to Tyler, where you're a young guy, but you're doing a lot of really cool things that I wish I'd started when I was your age versus when I did start them. So for people that haven't seen you in the digital space or in any space, frankly, why don't you give us a little bit of a resume overview of who you are and what you do?
Yeah, for sure. So I graduated college about 2 years ago. It'll be 2 years ago here in like a week or so. And I went to school for data analytics, and I also got a finance degree, but went to school for data analytics. And right immediately out of college, I went to Optum Health here um, in the Twin Cities, which is part of UHG, the biggest healthcare company in the world, pretty much. And did the corporate thing for about 7 months, and I enjoyed the emerging technologies there, but I hated the corporate world. And I knew from really early on in my life that I probably wasn't going to fit in a traditional path, and that prophecy came true. And through a series of events that I can dive into more here, I ended up going down the entrepreneurship route, got into media, got into podcasting, and got into influencer marketing. And so, long story short, I started my current company, Aterna, about 10 months ago. We are a brand management and marketing agency. We do a lot of work in the influencer space, do a lot of brand identity design, brand strategy, and have really been kind of finding our groove actually in the past few months during Corona. Right now, I'm a CEO of a company really focused on emerging media, really interested in kind of the future of how humans interact with technology. And on the side, I dabble a lot in nootropics.
I have no idea what that is. What are nootropics?
Like, have you ever followed any of like Dave Asprey's content? Excuse me.
Nope.
Bulletproof or Tim Ferriss. So like smart drugs, but not necessarily. I mean, the most stereotypical smart drug is like modafinil. That's like the thing that everyone says is the limitless pill, and I've definitely tried modafinil, but more so on the like the natural side of things. So just human optimization through science and ancient wisdom, and part of that is optimizing like the supplements and the compounds that you're putting in your body. So nootropics are like pretty much stacks of different things. It could be completely natural, it could be just herbs and plants, or it could be synthetic, but just trying to optimize your brain and body function.
Hmm.
So that's in a nutshell what they are.
Interesting. So I want to back up to a couple things you said. The first, you mentioned you feel like you knew early on you wouldn't fit into a normal path. And I'm curious, as a young person, what was that moment where you're like, "Oh, wait a second, I'm not like everyone else." What makes you say something like that?
Yeah, and first off, I do want to say I don't really think there's one definition of normal that holds true anywhere. So I don't want anyone to think that normal is bad or traditional is bad. It's just there is a path that the average person takes or is more likely to take that I kind of knew that I didn't really fit in. And I intuitively, I think I knew it really early on, even in middle school, high school. I guess that for the Gary Vee fans out there, that might not be that early, but middle school, high school, just like I was always really good at school and academics and such, but I questioned too many things, and I really I didn't like. Going into a structure I didn't like going into a class and just accepting that what the professor or the teacher was telling me that I needed to learn was valuable for me to learn. I was like, okay, well, why? Why am I learning this? What is the purpose behind this? I want to understand how this works. And so I went into technology for a bit. Was going to be a CS major, ended up getting a minor, but like I really wanted to understand how everything works, and not so that I could go and make money building things for someone else, but so I could kind of create new things. And I pretty much just figured out that business and kind of understanding how to apply business strategically was the best way for someone to be able to do that at scale in the world we live in. So
Yeah, I identify with that. I often found myself in some sticky situations, pushing back on authority figures, just asking that question, why, right? Or challenging, like you said,
I'll
why do I have to learn this? This doesn't make any sense. This is a waste of my time. And then you're standing in a room full of classmates when you say that. It doesn't always go over so well. So I've been there.
Yeah, I'll say there is one moment, and it happened in eighth grade, where and I've told this story a few times, but I had a teacher who assigned this like really big project for the last month of the last year of eighth grade, which was like at the time we were graduating from the middle school or the charter school I was at. And I was not very motivated to do this project. And so I calculated that if I got a zero on the project and got A's on everything else I needed to get A's on in that class, I would still get an A in the class. And there wasn't anything, they could, the teacher could do about that. So I pretended like I was doing it for 2 months. And then the last day of the class and the last day at that school, I showed up and everyone presented this huge project. And I was pretty much like, yep, I didn't do it. And I know I'm going to get an A in the class. So isn't that the point of this class, is to get the grade, right? And the teacher, so kind of short-circuited my teacher's brain, I think. And
Yeah.
she wasn't very happy, understandably. I made her life a little difficult, but that was probably the moment when I knew that I wasn't going to fit in a traditional path.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure you short circuited your classmates' brains too with that too. They're looking at you like, oh man, that was an option. Like you can do that.
Yeah, I mean, that's entrepreneurship in a nutshell, though. It's pretty much like you go figure out how to do things that other people haven't done, and oftentimes that means you break some things. So
Yeah. So if you knew that you didn't fit into that quote unquote normal role, right? And like we said, there's all types of definitions to that. But when did you first become introduced to the idea of entrepreneurship? And then you were like, oh, yeah, that'll work. Who was the first entrepreneur you saw?
um, yeah, interestingly enough, I didn't really know anyone well, I didn't have a personal relationship with anyone who I really like wanted to follow as an entrepreneur, or really that was a successful entrepreneur, I guess, if I think about it, until the last semester of college, which was about 2 years ago. But a couple years before, I had come across. I wasn't really thinking about going and starting my own companies or anything until sophomore year of college, when I came across Tim Ferriss. And I came across Tim Ferriss, if you know who that is,
Yep. Yeah.
through illegally downloading a copy of the audiobook of The 4 Hour Chef, because I was interested in, and still am, but was interested in cooking. So that's that. And I listened to the first 2 hours of that book, and it was all about meta learning. And I was like, oh, this is way more interesting than pretty much anything else I'm learning right now in school. So I'm gonna just dive into this. I came across this podcast. One thing led to another. Kind of opened up a rifts and showed me, another world that existed that I could go try to live in, if I wanted to. And that world inspired me so much more than the path I was on, which was pretty much end up in a corporate job forever. And so really, really after that, I was hooked.
So is the current company that you started the first company you started, or were there others before this one?
No, I mean, I've started a couple like personal LLCs to do, if you're going to get technical, to do, contracting work and such. I was a part of founding a company called Bag Mentality. I wasn't the original founder, but I came in kind of early on, and that was where I did the podcast, that probably led to you finding me. And that lasted for about 6 months. And through a pretty unfortunate series of events, which were fortunate in the long run, but at the time very unfortunate. I got burned pretty bad, not by the other founder of that company, but by another guy that we were doing some deals with, and that pretty much dissolved, and kind of led me to starting Eterna.
So how does a young, you're not even 25 yet. How does a sub 25-year-old go about starting a company? Like what? Because I'm with you on college. Like I graduated from college, and I don't think I could have taken my diploma and then gone and started a company. Like I wouldn't have known what it would have taken. So what was that
Oh,
path like for you?
I had no I had
Yeah.
no idea. And I probably the first company I was a part of, and I wasn't full time on it. Like when I had started doing it, I was still in my corporate job, and I quit 3 or so months into it. And that wasn't I was doing some events and some stuff in the music space as well, to generate revenue. So it wasn't the only thing I was doing as an entrepreneur. There's often a lot of things, a lot of different income streams that you dabble in. So it wasn't the only thing I was doing, but I remember like hiring my first part-time employee, and I way overpaid someone for a job that I really didn't even need to hire for, and ended up taking on a ton of overhead that was really, I mean, I made all the mistakes in the book, and not really intelligently either. I just kind of dived headfirst and was like, how many mistakes can I make in a few months, or a year? And I checked off a lot of them, but that was really the best and only way for me to learn at the place I was at, because I wasn't satisfied with waiting. I wasn't satisfied with, and looking back, there's ways I could have done it more intelligently, but I wasn't satisfied with waiting for an opportune moment or the right time. I was like, this is the life I want to live, and I'm going to figure out how to live it right now, even if it's painful, which it was. and even if I fail and fail a lot, because I know that if I stick with it and I learn from the failures, that I'm going to get somewhere. So.
Yeah, I love that attitude. And I'm curious. I don't think I ever saw this anywhere. What did bag mentality mean? Like, what does that even?
So the concept was the concept, and again, I didn't come up with the concept initially, but kind of what we were trying to brand it was as the bag was your definition of success, and that was the podcast was, what's your bag, with the bag mentality, culturally the connotation of the bag is money, like, get the bag, chase the bag. Pick up the bag. It's in hip hop culture. It's just it's slang for money, basically, like get your check. And so what we were trying to do, and what I was really trying to do through the podcast was challenge the definition of success that I saw like really widely being spread out through entrepreneur cultures and pop cultures, but entrepreneur culture especially. To try to challenge, why people were doing what they were doing, and hopefully drive some growth through that.
So, what lessons did you take from bag mentality into building your current company?
Um, a lot of what not to do,
Okay.
but current. I mean, I was not when I started bag mentality, and no offense to anyone that was involved in that company or anything, because it was completely, my responsibility too. But it was not. I mean, we were trying to start a media company and make, and we had some digital products that had a lot of potential, and probably we would have figured it out if we would have been able to stick with it. But we really didn't. We weren't smart with. What we were attempting to do. We were jumping directly into the media space as our first kind of business model was like media and events. And it takes a while to build a media platform. It takes a while to build a following. It takes a while to monetize a following, to grow, community for events and scale that. And we had some good ideas, and we were getting into colleges and different places, not just in Minnesota, but starting to gain traction elsewhere. And so there was potential, but we didn't really follow the money first. We were like, we want to do this, so we have a good idea, so we're going to go make it work. But we didn't really figure out how to like what that would look like cash flow wise. And so we were bleeding a lot of money, and then we just had way too much overhead too. We thought, let's scale. We're going to bring on people to, fill the roles, because, we don't want to do everything. We're entrepreneurs. We're going to work on the business, not in the business. And like sometimes you have to work in, you have to work in the business a
Right.
bit,
Someone's got
so
to work in the business.
so what the business is. And we were like, hey, let's skip that step, and the business will just make itself. And it didn't. And not because there wasn't potential there, but because we really just kind of skipped a lot of foundational things, I think. And we got excited by, at the time we were working with another guy who had kind of sold us on some stuff in, he'd been in the music industry and managed some artists, and kind of sold us on some stuff, some shows and some stuff that we were getting into. And we threw a couple events with him, and just kind of got enticed by his relationships, or what we thought were his relationships, with influencers and artists, and that potential for what we could do with a business there. And it was good hearted, but we ended up getting totally fucked by that guy, and he stole over 5 figures from both me and my co-founder and executive of Bag Mentality. And so we really just weren't street smart. So probably the biggest thing outside of, there's a lot of business lessons that I learned, and I'm still learning. But probably the biggest thing was trust your gut with people, and like emotional intelligence, and learning how to read and deal with other people in the business world is probably the most important thing, outside of like yeah, I mean, you got to have a business and a product and such. But I mean, even then, like, if you can't work with people or make reads of people, have an intuitive sense of like, I shouldn't be in this deal, even if there's the potential for money because it doesn't feel right. That's probably the biggest thing I learned, and that's paid off already with my current company. So
Yeah. So you said it's been about, I think you said like 10 or 11 months of their current company, and coming up on almost 1 year in business, which is a huge deal for young companies. You say, if you can make it past that, you can make it past almost anything.
yep.
Curious, what's different about Will a year into this company versus at the very beginning of the company?
Yeah, no, I mean, honestly, at the very beginning of the company, which was June, so I guess it was the end of June, it was the last day of June that we filed. I was not in a great place. Had just come off a pretty big and embarrassing failure, at least in my mind. In the grand scheme of things, it wasn't very big at all, but in my mind and in my life at the time, it was pretty big. I was not in a great place, just mentally, psychologically. My mental health wasn't great. But I mean, I had people around me, and I'd met my current partner who I had started to work with, and I saw the opportunity and kind of knew I had a shot. And so I took it, but I wasn't. I'm a much different person than I am now. I think just because I'm much more in control of my emotions. I'm much calmer. Things don't faze me as much, and I'm sure I'll improve, the same amount in the next year or year or two from where I am now. But I was kind of getting thrown all over the place and getting sucked into a lot of stuff that a lot of potential deals, opportunities, things that were shiny objects. It didn't really stick with anything long enough to really get traction right away when I started the company. And part of that was because I was hungry. And one of Master P, was a famous rapper, businessman, very successful businessman, now lives in Minnesota. I saw a piece of content where he said, the worst time to do business or make business deals is when you're hungry, right? Because you're not doing it for the right motivations. You just want the check. And I think that was probably the biggest thing that hampered me right away. And it wasn't because I was, I'm greedy and I just wanted it. It was like I literally, was trying to get out of a hole that I just found myself in. And I thought I had something to prove, and so I was hungry, and because of that, I didn't plan or think strategically as well as I should have, and it took me longer to get traction with this company than it could have because of that. So I don't know if I coherently answered that question,
Yeah,
but
no, you did
hopefully
fine.
there's some good bits in there.
Yeah, absolutely. Another thing I'm curious about, because it's something that I felt when I was in my 20s. Like I told you, I think before we started recording, I just turned 30, so it's not like they're that far away. But when I was 26, I was promoted to be the general manager of a large company. It was doing 50 million in revenue, about 400 employees, and it was like, holy crap, they're really letting me do this, And I battled constantly people looking at me like I was a child. Like, well, what am I doing in this position? I've worked at this company longer than you've been alive. Like, who are you to be my boss? And so now you started it, so it might be different for you. But do you ever walk into a boardroom and you say, hey, I'm the CEO, and you're 24 and you're sitting across the table from somebody that's 44 and they're looking at you like, what the hell are you doing? Do you ever run into that?
Um, yes, and yeah, I definitely have. I mean, even at like even renting office spaces and um, just doing a lot of stuff at this age without having, a story attached to my name yet. Like I don't have that. Like we live in a world of clout, and so if you're young and you have clout, then it's like, oh, it's that guy. He's the so and so who did whatever, or is known in the scene, so to speak. And And so, he has credibility, but if you don't have clout and you're not playing that game, and especially if you're really trying to be legitimate in business too, you're not just trying to be an influencer, which I think there's a lot of great things about influence, but a lot of bad things about that, what it's done, what the influencer culture has done too. So if you're really trying to be seen as a peer with successful business leaders and executives and entrepreneurs, it is really difficult when you're young before you've really had that first big win. Because yeah, I mean, like you described, it's always a battle for convincing people that you're credible, convincing people that you can deliver, and you do experience. I've been in rooms where I've felt looked down upon, or been at kind of asked, or implicitly asked, like what are you doing here? So I think there's really no way around it other than, like, one thing I will say is, if you look like money, you can ask for money. So appearances do matter, and how you carry yourself, and how you, not just, how you look, but how you speak, um, and how you relate to other people. That is big. And that's something I've learned a lot too, doing this company. But yeah, I mean, it's just something you deal with as a young entrepreneur. I don't think there's any great way around it. You just got to go through it.
Yeah, I think that's a great piece of advice. I like. I want to get your take of it because I hear people giving advice on it that are past it and you're in it, right? And so I think those are good tidbits about, if you look like money, you can ask for money, right? You have to look the part. You can't show up and just say, hey, I'm 23 and wear a backwards ball cap and expect people to take you seriously, right? And I like the idea, though, too. You can't go around it. You just have to go through it, and you'll be stronger for it, right? You can prove that you do belong there by your actions, not what other people are saying.
Yeah, it's a balance of knowing who you're talking to, who you're trying to do a deal with, who you're trying to make a relationship with, and playing some of the game that you have to play to really fit in, or get into a network or close a deal. But at the same time, maintaining your authenticity, maintaining who you are, and maybe for some people that might be, the scallop tee, long tee, and the baseball cap, and the Yeezys. Like, there's a lot of marketing CEOs that look like that right now, and they're making money. So it's not it's not impossible to really stand out, visually, as long as you can come across as competent. You can come across as someone who cares in some way about your employees, your clients, the people that you're working with, or partnering with. And there's things that you can do, intangibly, like that kind of, you can still get away with some flair, and being different too. And I would say that being different it's a balance. It's a balance. But being different is also important. So I wouldn't go too far to just fit in, because that's the whole reason why we do the entrepreneurship thing too, right? But
Right. Go against the crowd, right? Stand out. So I'm curious, you've really leaned into the entrepreneurship thing, a few companies now. What would it take for you to go back to corporate America and simply be an employee?
um, I it would have right now. I mean, I would tell myself I never would, but I probably would, if it was really strategic, if I saw value in it, as long as it didn't uh, completely take it. I didn't have to sign away um, any, like, all of my thoughts and intellectual property about every industry for the duration of my term there. Like, it's understandable if you go to a company, and in healthcare or some type of technology, that if you should be creating technology in that space for that company while you're employed by them. But one thing that worries me is kind of signing my whole life and creativity away, which can happen in certain arrangements. But I probably would do it if if I could see how the position I'm taking would clearly help me advance and make greater impact on the world, and be in a position to, exponentially um, scale what I'm already trying to do, or start a different company down the road. I mean, there's reasons I would do it strategically, just to gain relationships or gain expertise that I could then go take. But I'm always going to be creating, so I would eventually go create something again.
Yeah, I appreciate that answer because that's a non bullshit answer right there. I feel like the easy one to say never, right? I'm an entrepreneur till I die, but that was a strategic answer, and that I think that's real and that makes sense. There's a time and place for everything, and you're gaining all sorts of experience now that would absolutely be valuable to an employer down the road should you choose to go there. And like you said, you could parlay it into something else for you down the line too. It just has to be strategic.
Oh, and if there's a group, like if there's a place, if I find a place that has a culture where, um, I feel like I can move as fast as I can move on my own, and I also feel like I have some ownership, of the work and of myself, and I can grow it, both financially and otherwise. That's something I'd be open to. I just don't see that really, for some, especially for someone, of my age with my level of experience. Like you really have to take the third door, so to speak, and then maybe I think I'll be more marketable to corporations because of all the stuff I've done, um, in the last year and a half, and then in the next few years, and I would have if I would have just stayed at my corporate job too. So, I'm always open. I never say never, because it's not a identity thing. Like I don't have to never work for anyone. I mean, we have clients who work for them. Like it's pretty much the same thing. It's just as long as you can have that freedom to create and to take ownership of how fast you want to grow. That's something that can be difficult, within a corporate framework.
Yeah, for sure. Well, that's a great point. That's a good. That's a nice, healthy way to look at it for sure. Um, so I'm curious. You've done a lot in a short amount of time since college. How would you describe this journey you've been on so far in 3 words?
Um, I knew you were going to ask me that, but I completely forgot about it.
Yeah. And
Give
doesn't
me,
count
give
as a
me.
word.
Is not one of my words. Do they have to be like nouns, or can they really be
It can be,
verbs,
yeah,
or can they
literally
really be
any
anything?
three singular
Anything.
words, can be a phrase that happens to be 3 words, whatever fits.
I'm gonna say phenomena, equanimity, and persistence.
Well, out of 150 some episodes, I don't think I've gotten phenomena or equanimity yet. So you get to own those. Why don't you talk about those three? What do you mean by phenomena, equanimity, and then persistence?
Yeah, so phenomena, and like full disclosure, I'm gonna be coming out with a pod and my next podcast here soon. And I don't know if I'm gonna title it this yet or not, but this word is pretty, and the concept that I, have been kind of working with is, around the word phenomena, and kind of the philosophy of phenomenology has definitely influenced me. And so phenomena, like, I will say that, so one of my passions is, mental health, and, not just mental health, but like, and fixing what's broken, but kind of like taking it to the next level, and turning what the things that we go through, and that, which some of them are good, some of them are bad, but they're all, we go through things that are hard in life, right? And so taking those things and using them to move forward and to grow and to get stronger as humans, and become better humans, better citizens of the world, better at whatever it is we want to be in the world. That is something that I'm really passionate about. Having come from a place at one point in my life where I dealt with a lot of depression and had a very fixed mindset. I am a very firm believer that, I mean, you can really take anything that happens to you, and use it and frame it for good, right? One of the problems I see with the way that we treat mental health, and I think this bleeds over into really our whole framework for life here, especially in the West, is we like to pathologize. In what I mean by that is we like to kind of break everything down into the sum of its parts, and then break those parts down and understand everything, so we can have a really coherent model of the world that that works until it's broken, and then we diagnose what's broken, and then it's coherent again. And really, I don't think that's. I think that's limiting in a lot of ways. And using the analogy of mental health, if you only focus on you see someone who is having an experience of suffering, and it's psychological suffering, or at least you think it's psychological suffering, and all you do is you diagnose that person, and then you medicate them. You are not allowing that person to validate that experience. That experience might be, like, for example, someone with severe depression or schizophrenia. It's like there's a lot of things that we just don't understand, that we don't need to pathologize them, but understand them through the lens of phenomenology, which validates the individual's experience, which then allows that individual to take that experience and create meaning around it, which hopefully is positive or can be directed to be positive, so that individual can then grow and learn how to contribute to the world in the way that they want to contribute to the world, right? And so that is the core concept of phenomena in my mind, and it's been my life, is like you can't just take someone's prescription or diagnosis of where you're at, who you are, what your problems are. Like you really have to trust and validate your own experience, and then take everything you learn with a grain of salt. But at the end of the day, use what you've been given to move forward and rise and grow. And then what were the other words? Were equanimity.
Yeah, equanimity was the next one.
Equanimity is just like leaning into the edge, right? Just like when you're in it, when you're getting knocked around, when you're in the ring, just not trying to fight it, not trying to swim against the waves in the ocean, but learn to surf, right? That's been really important. And then the last, I said phenomena, equanimity, and persistence. Yeah, I mean, persistence along the same lines has been a really big part of my story. Is I haven't given up. And there's many times when I could have, and from the outside, maybe it looked like I should have, but I didn't. And I think that's, a very deep truth for me, is that if you move towards something on a long enough time horizon, as long as you're not completely insane and just repeating the same things over and over without learning or changing, you are going to get somewhere.
Right. And in order to move towards something, you have to move away from something, right? So that,
absolutely,
use your example, right? You had to move away from bag mentality to get to where you are right now. And so you can look at it that way as well. That's all part of persistence.
100%.
So before we wrap up, is there anything else, the famous last open-ended podcast question, is there anything else you want to say and leave to the listeners here? Open floor.
Yeah, I mean, biggest thing on my mind right now, just be really clear on what you want, and why you want it, and why you think you want it, and then probably question that again, because like just playing around with that question of, why am I doing what I'm doing? Why do I want what I want? Is this really what I want, or just what I, my ego thinks I want? And then take that and go and figure out, like, am I on the right path? And don't do that in a way that you stall and just sit around questioning yourself forever, but start taking some action and testing, and you might be completely wrong, but like if you're not really happy with where you're going right now, go try something else, and question some things. So
it's great advice. So if people listen to this and they want to hear more about the Will Preble phenomena, where can they find you? Where should we send them?
Yeah, LinkedIn's probably the best place. I haven't been super active creating in the last 6 to 9 months or so, but I'm getting back on it. I'm prepping to do the podcasting thing again, and so I'll be on LinkedIn for sure. Instagram as well. So probably LinkedIn or Instagram. It's W Preble on Instagram. LinkedIn is just my name. So
awesome. We'll send people that way. Thanks so much for your time here. This has been great.
No, thank you, man. I appreciate you having me on.
All right, that's a wrap for this episode of Relish the Journey. Thank you all so much for listening, and a very special thank you once again to Will for being our guest. If you guys liked this episode, please go ahead and subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already. Share it with somebody you think would also find value in Will's story. That's how we all get to relish the journey as one big happy group. So until next time, everyone, cheers.